My point is always to remind people that there is a standard here and that they are not reaching that standard. Now, context matters, and I understand that. But he's been so bad at recruiting that the thought was then, oh no, what's 2-10 going to do? And what he's been able to do is somehow overcome both a lack of prowess in recruiting and a season to forget to put together what might end up being a top 15 class when it's all said and done. And that is exceeding expectations. That is worthy of the lauding praise that it's getting, where folks are saying, well, my goodness gracious, what is happening here? Because it's completely out of left field. It has not been something that we would expect, especially coming off of 2-10, and it's not something his MO suggests we should expect. So the fact that it's happening is a good thing, and you should be excited, but it's relative. They're still not going to have a top 10 class in all likelihood. It's okay. It's not, this is a big boy conversation. It's all right to say what it is. We don't have to get all caught up in the joys as to avoid the realities of the sorrows, but we can also say that there's good and bad to all of this. This is better than to be expected.
Yeah.
For sure.
I think what it does is it opens up the possibility that you could finish with a top 10 class. I would deem that impossible 3 weeks ago, that Florida State, no matter what happens in the season, would be capable of finishing with a top 10 class. So you beat Alabama, not only is it possible, it's a coin flip that you could finish in the top 10. With the work that they've done now in the summer to put themselves in a position to be the cool team again, the newcomer to the conversation. It's quick. You're in, you're out in terms of recruiting and cycles, whether or not you're a cool team, you're one of the haves, you're one of the interesting teams or not. We are ice cold in that regard. And yet, here we are, that if you were to score an upset over Alabama and take that into a 9-win season, you might have the momentum. And I do think you might have the cash to pull it off to be a top 10 recruiting program. I think you might be able to, because when you combine what they were able to do in December of last year to save last year's class from disaster and only and bring it up to the status of below average, that was not nothing. And if you combine that with the efforts of this summer, okay, now you've got a trend that says that they can swing for the fences and hit some home runs on the trail. It doesn't matter if the product sucks. We all understand that. But I think top 10 was impossible 3 weeks ago, and now it's at least got a chance if you go ahead and play well.
I would agree with that. I would throw in that there's a difference between amassing a top 10 class because you have whatever we have now, 19 commitments, and say a class that is much smaller, like, I don't know, 7 or 8 commitments so far, and the quality of the 7 or 8 versus the quantity of the 19. A good example of that would be LSU, right? LSU has something like 8 or 9 commitments the last I checked. They're all very, very high quality. Their rating, their overall rating would be better than that of our average rating. But quantity in this situation, when you're trying to flip a roster, does matter. And it's not nothing.
Well, and also, now that you're at 105, these quantities are going to go high anyway. I'm not trading that hypothetical of shooting for the stars for this one. This is what you have in front of you, and I think the ROI on expectations is really healthy. Like I asked Michael this question on the Smash on Monday. I said, give a letter grade for what they've done so far, given the pieces on the table on the board. How have they done? He said B+. He said, now if they finish with Kennan, who he commits early July, so late next week, I think. You get him, he's like, then it might slide to an A-. And I think that feels about right. It's not an A+, well, but it's a B. It ain't a C. This is a B+ or an A-. I think he nailed it there.
Yeah, they don't. Yes. Yeah. And I'm careful not to just continually shoot down anything. I'm just saying they don't have like a top 100 player. They don't have like a top 50 player. They don't.
Kennan will be that.
There would be your star right there. There would be your diamond. Yeah. But they don't, they're not up there swimming with the biggest of the big boys for these best players in college football.
No.
And that's the next step, because that is where Florida State should live.
Sure. If you want to go against program expectations all time, this is not going to cut it. If you want to go against where we felt we were going to be a month ago or 6 weeks ago, this is nice. This is good.
And I do both is my point.
Yeah.
I do absolutely both. I keep in mind that, okay, look, this is amazing for where we're at right now after 2-10 and what he hasn't been as a recruiter. This is really a pleasant surprise. And I mean that. I don't say that with, any amount of cynicism. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. If I hold him to an elite standard, I say, look, I'm tired of seeing Miami sign guys that are a lot more higher ranked than ours, and Florida do the same, and LSU do the same, and Alabama and Notre Dame, and, name them all.
Yeah, the hard part, I think, was, last hour we're talking about pulling weeds and stuff. The path was covered in weeds and shrubs and debris.
To the ground.
We have cleared the path that you can see one now.
Yeah.
There is one. And that legwork, if at all, let's just say the season goes well for a moment and be positive. Let's say the season goes well, you score one of those upsets. Yeah. You're going to look back at that sequence in mid to late June, and you're going to say,
you are.
Oh man,
opened the door.
It was an open door to a launching point that allows us to finish ninth in the industry rankings, or 10th in the industry rankings. Thank God they got those yeses then, because now Jaden O'Neal can go to work, and when he texts you, that kid's gonna be like, well, I see what you're talking about, Jaden. They are doing well on the football field.
It's huge. It absolutely matters. It does count for something. Not saying that it doesn't, just tempering because of the question, what that question was. Does this get the heat off of Mike? And what a huge jump in recruiting. It's all relative. He's done a much better job than to be expected after going 2-10. And they are now in a position that if they have a turnaround season, they could rank even better. And then they would enter into the realm where they should have always been.
Yeah, it felt like before this run they went on, including a couple of good flips, and the quarterback situation deteriorating, you're like, well, it's Jaden or bust. And they got the yes from Jaden. It felt like at kickoff of the Alabama game, we might be 19th, 21st, 25th in the rankings. You can't get to 10 from 19. You can get to 10 from 13 or 14 if that's where we are by the time they kick.
Well, and let me just say this, Tom. I would have had that happen. So they whiffed on their top 2 targets at quarterback. Those guys, even those that said they were going to come on a visit and then canceled. That's never a good look, and we've had too many players do that. But not to just live in the negative. Had that happen, and had we been sitting there at 21st or wherever your example, the example you just gave was, I would also know that could be altered with a 32-17 win over Alabama. That all those guys were like, no, I'm not going to Florida State. Oh, hey, that changes things too, for the good, not just the bad. We always talk about, well, if they don't go out and win games, they're screwed. But if they do, then they will be even more elevated than they're currently sitting now. They'll get perhaps consideration from some of those upper echelon recruits I'm saying that we're not bringing in right now.